I'd like to thank you for joining us for this month's Best Practices webinar. And I'm really pleased to have on the line with me today a new group of guest speakers. John Schulz, who's the president of EnviroSolve, that is the parent company of JSA Builder, and as well as a couple of other members of his team. And they're going to be presenting today's topic on the importance of job safety analysis. And this is particularly exciting to me. I've been doing these programs for about 4 years, and on our Best Practices series, we offer a variety of topics that pertain to maintenance and reliability and operations and inventory, wrench time, all those type of topics. But this is actually the first time that we've done something about safety and improving safety in the workplace. So I'm very excited to be to have this team with us today and to be listening in myself and learning. A little bit about John and his team. Mr. Schulz is an environmental health and safety manager and has had over 30 years of experience. In the course of his career, he's managed EHS at oil and gas research labs and has served as a safety consultant to property managers in a UK-based oil and gas company. He's also the president, as I mentioned, of EnviroSolve, which is an EHS consulting company and is the parent company of JSA Builder. And he helped develop JSA Builder and the company's other online services. So, John, thanks so much for joining us today, and to Sam and Ashley and your team, I'd like to wish you a good morning. And John, while people are, while our listeners are logging in, maybe you can take a moment, because this is a new topic to us, and talk a little bit about what prompted you from your background as a consultant in EHS to developing this online application, and maybe also how you and eMaint managed to get introduced and connected.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. I appreciate it. And good morning to everyone, or good afternoon. I think we have someone from the UK joining. Yeah, I started managing a function, EHS function at a major oil and gas company laboratory at 1,200 employees. And one of the areas we had challenges with was maintenance, and we'd had lacerations, contusions, and strains and sprains, the kind of typical things that you might expect. So we developed a job safety analysis program, and used to do these on Excel spreadsheets, and it became obvious to us that Excel spreadsheets, or if you use Word documents, they tend to get filed away somewhere, and they don't have quite the accessibility of as a database. In the course of my evolution, then, I was able to work as a consultant, and as the internet evolved and as databases evolved, had the opportunity of getting with someone who has unique skills in developing databases and online solutions, and they prompted us to develop JSA Builder, which is a program, online program for developing job safety analyses. I will use interchangeably the word job safety analyses, and it's interchangeable job hazard analysis, which is an OSHA required, or I should say an OSHA approved technique for analyzing hazards and controls, and for the purpose of eliminating or minimizing those hazards. Last year, we reached out to our user community and said, gee, we think that this is a good opportunity to integrate programs with maintenance, and we're pleasantly surprised when within an hour of launching a newsletter that said as such, we got a contact from one of our users who introduced us to eMaint, and here we are. We've been working now with the eMaint folks for about a year, and it's been a very pleasant experience. And we're very excited to have this opportunity to speak with you all. So, Rona, do you want to go ahead and ask the poll question right now, so we can get an idea of the folks what their interests are here?
Sure. So just a little background information that John would like us to ask. So I'm going to launch a couple quick polls. If you can please just type the questions right into your keyboard, type your answers into the keyboard, just so we get a feel for who's on the line with us today and how much explaining John will have to do of the concepts. So does your organization currently conduct job safety analyses? Let us know. A, yes, we have a program in place. B, yes, we have a program, but it's pretty infrequently used. Or C, nope, today we don't conduct JSAs, but perhaps there's some interest and that's why you're here. All right, so again, this is an anonymous poll, but we just want to sort of get an understanding of who's on the line with us today. Looks like we've got about 90% voted. So let me give it a few more seconds. Okay. Good. Well, thanks for that feedback. John, what our listeners are telling us, 19% say they have a robust program in place, but I guess, you can never stop learning. B, 44% say they have a program, but it's infrequently used. And then the balance, 38%, say no, today they don't conduct. So a little over a third say no, almost half say yes, but it's infrequently used, and about 20% have a robust program. All right, and then one more question before I turn things over to John. Let's tell us a little bit. This is a bit of an unusual webinar because we're talking about safety, and it's also something, safety analyses, and it's something that integrates with eMaint. But we do open these up to the whole community, many of whom are eMaint users. So just let us know, if you would, what your primary goal is for today. Understanding what a job safety analysis is, understanding how it can help you improve safety, understanding more about hazards or controls, or understanding how JSAs can be integrated with eMaint X3. And I probably should have made this a multiple answers because maybe you'd like to know all of the above. All right, we have about 80% of the votes in, so let me give it a few more seconds. And by the way, we are recording today's session, and so we'll share a copy of the recording with all of our listeners today. Okay, let's go ahead and share those results. So John, what we've learned, 15% would like to understand what a job safety analysis is. 28% would like to understand how it can improve workplace safety and reduce costs. 21% understand more about hazards and controls. And then 37% are asking how it can integrate with eMaint X3, which I know you'll be covering. All right, and one last housekeeping question before I turn over the webinar to John and his team is I do have the phones on mute because we are recording the session, but please feel free. John has agreed to and his team to stay through the hour and answer any of your questions at the end of the session, but please feel free to type them in the questions feature at any time, and then I will read them to John once he's done presenting. All right, so without further ado, I turn it over to you, John.
Okay, thank you, Rona. Let me introduce our team on our end. Sam Creamer is our IT manager, lead developer. He's got about 10 years of experience, and when we show you the JSA Builder, because we're going to use it to help demonstrate how you create a JSA, you will see his handiwork and see what we think is a very intuitive and easy program to use. Ashley Spear will be driving the controls here today. She has about a year with us. She's our customer care rep, and most days her phone doesn't ring, but a few days it does, and she's available. She's got about 5 years in the EHS consulting field, so she's got some experience in consulting. Now, JSA Builder as an entity, we've been involved since 2008 in supporting and improving JSA processes. One of the things that we have done over the years is evolved the JSA Builder to address user needs. We have nearly 700 organizations, and they represent a wide variety from manufacturing, the healthcare industry, we have military, we have parks and municipalities. We have such a wide variety of clients that sometimes we get clients that we didn't even know that people did those kinds of things. And we have over 4,000 users, and I think we're upwards of 30,000 JSAs that we actually have stored in our database. Okay, let me start with the agenda, what I intend to do today. If nothing else, I want to take away here and those of you that have a robust program will understand that JSAs are an effective part of your helping to avoid injuries and control the hazards in the workplace. But what I want folks to really walk away with is it is a technique to help you avoid the injuries. It is a process. What we see is documentation. The actual document is, you see the JSA Builder or your JSA document is actually documenting a process where you work with the folks who are actually doing it and to ideate the job hazards and implement controls to eliminate or minimize those hazards. Also, a takeaway, I want you to understand that it's very easy to document these and is an important part of documenting your engagement and then communicating with your workforce how to implement these controls to make sure you're safe in doing your job. Now, in order to do this, we'll spend just a few minutes on the background. What's the driver? Talk a little bit about hazards and controls. I think those of you who do have programs will understand some of the terminology that's being used. We'll try and make sure everybody understands. Then we'll spend some time on building a job safety analysis. And how I intend to do this is show you what the document looks like. Go through the steps, show you what the document looks like, and then we'll actually go into JSA Builder and show you how, and we'll just add a step to one that's already in our database. And then Sam will talk about the eMaintenance integration, how that can work. Because I'm a firm believer that if you integrate JSA with your maintenance activities, with your maintenance work orders, however you generate those, and have a complete package, it can be a very effective way to address maintenance activities and make sure that proper hazard identifications and controls go on. And then we'll do some Q&A. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Looking at 2012 injuries, there's 2.8 million injuries in the workplace, and these are injuries that require some form of medical treatment. 800,000 of those are in the goods producing sector, which is the manufacturing, and then 2 million in the service sector, which can encompass a wide variety of different activities, different company services. And billions of dollars are spent each year. And I don't know if your companies have much in that regard, but so this is where I want to ask Rona to do another poll question, just so we kind of understand. We're going to limit the number of injuries, but we still want to see kind of where you all are in terms of injuries. So, Rona, could you launch that question, please?
Sure. So if you wouldn't mind taking a moment and just type your response. In your workplace, what are the most common type of injuries in the maintenance department? Strains and sprains, cuts and contusions, repetitive motion injuries, or some other form. All right, so we have about 2/3 of the votes in. We'll give this about 10 more seconds. Okay, let me close this poll and share the results. So it looks like 46%, almost half, say strains and sprains are the most common. About 1/3 or 35% say cuts and contusions. Only 3% say repetitive motion, and about 16% have another form of injury. All right,
That's very helpful. Actually, one of the reasons I put a repetitive motion, one of the most serious injuries that I observed was an electrician who worked for us who had developed carpal tunnel, so much so that he could no longer perform his craft, and we unfortunately had to transfer him into security. And it was, I felt bad for the guy. He tried a variety of different things, and maybe you don't have those, obviously don't have those kinds of strains and sprains. Don't surprise me at all as people get in awkward positions, and we know how back injuries can be a challenge in any kind of activity that involves maintenance. So, okay, now let me move on to, obviously you all know that injuries have a significant impact, a toll on the injured employee, the employee's family, and I don't think anybody wants to have a colleague that gets injured in the workplace. One of the, I used to have a vice president of one of our business units provide some testimony when we did training sessions, and this testimony, after 3 days of being in a position of authority in the business unit, they had a fatality in one of the plants, and he used to tell these guys, you know, you don't want to be the one that has to go notify the next of kin. So it was a sobering message that the workforce received. Now, it does have a cost. Injuries have a cost, and those costs is about $37,000. That's based on 2010 stats. I believe those stats are much higher now, well over $40,000 just for medical, administrative, employee costs, etc. But I also understand and know there's significant hidden costs. There's hidden costs. If you lose an electrician, the productivity of your maintenance group may go out the window. There's time spent in investigations. If you have root cause analysis investigations or any kind of investigations, it can take a lot of time. And obviously, legal implications may come to play here. Job safety analysis is a solution. It's a accepted technique by OSHA, and it's to systematically examine a job to identify hazards, implement practical controls, and that's the key. Because sometimes controls, I think you can engineer out just about any kind of hazard, but obviously the practicality of engineering out is maybe pretty minimal. Okay, let me talk about hazards now. And as you see the definition, a condition or activity, if left uncontrolled, can result in injury or illness. I like to more simply state that as things that can hurt an employee. And those things, we put them into 4 broad categories. Physical hazards, chemical hazards, biological hazards, and radiation hazards. And when the way we figure the world or look at the world is we like to make our hazards analysis a little bit more straightforward. Instead of, as you see here, the types of energies that can cause hazards, we actually like to put things. For instance, gravitational, instead of putting gravitational as a hazard, we put scaffoldings. And you'll see that as we go through this. But be that as it may, under the physical hazard, these are the types of energies that can be encountered in a physical sense. Gravitational, you can fall or have falling object. You have kinetic energy. Obviously, ergonomics are a challenge, as you guys have to get into awkward positions sometimes to maintain equipment. Machine energy from the equipment itself. You have thermal burns. If you have a plant that has a lot of hot equipment or engines, people can get burned by leaning against that. If you work in outdoor environments, obviously this winter, I think if you've had to do any maintenance outside, thermal has been hypothermia has been a challenge, as well as slips, trips, and falls. We had an injury that we were aware of. Some guy in one of the facilities that we're aware of was going from point A to point B and slipped on the ice and fractured his leg. So, and there could have been some things done to avoid that. And then heat stress. Hydraulics, drowning if you work around water, motive force from the hydraulics, struck by hydraulics, electrical energy, shocks and burns, and electrocution. Now, how we have that reflected in our physical hazards are power lines and power cords, so that the folks that are actually doing the work can identify the hazards. They say, oh yeah, we got power lines in this particular area, so we need to be careful of the power lines. Noise is pretty straightforward. And then stored energy, steam, compressed gas. I don't know if any of you have ever, in any of your training sessions, ever seen a compressed line release, but those things could dance and whip around pretty dramatically. Coming from the oil and gas industry, we had those occasionally, and you would see them, and boy, they're deadly. Okay, let's move on to the hazards, and the biological hazards and exposure to infectious diseases. We have some hospital folks that this is a concern with them. Insect bites and stings. In the oil patch, the black widows used to love to get into boxes, and rattlesnakes loved equipment skids to either, in the summertime, use a shade, or in the wintertime, they would use to warm up on concrete. Chemical hazards, when you think about it, when you're exposed to chemicals, you can have corrosive chemicals that you're exposed to. You can have reactive chemicals, which may result in fires or explosions, and then you have dust and fumes. Out on a job site one time, I looked into an area where they were using agents to solidify material, and the dust was so thick in there you could hardly see across the room, so they obviously didn't have the proper controls in place. Radiation hazards, ionizing, IR, UV, electromagnetic. I was a radiation safety officer in this lab that I mentioned. We had X-ray, CT scans, and radioactive sources, and you can't tell anything that you're exposed to. But we had to put a lot of controls in place to minimize the exposure of our employees there. And folks were actually had dosimeters on them that we collected and had to have analyzed. Okay, now I'm going to move on to controls, and you can see here the definition. Controls are actions taken to eliminate or minimize safety hazards. I'd like to think of as things you do to prevent hazards. And in the hierarchy, obviously, the engineering controls are the best, where you either remove the hazard, or in the case you may substitute chemicals. You can enclose hazards, like by putting sound barriers, and I've seen that done in compressors in buildings that were particularly noisy. They were able to build a sound barrier to isolate that. You could isolate the hazards by things like machine guards or welding curtains. And then removal or redirection of the hazard. Ventilation is the most common of those. Engineering, as I mentioned earlier, are the best solution and the highest order in the hierarchy, but oftentimes they're the most impractical. So next you might put in administrative controls and permits. Permits allow you to work into an area. And then as far as administrative controls, there are policies, procedures, manuals, practices. What we find as we review our databases, licensed or competent employees are very important. I think forklift operators have to be properly trained. In the case of Lotto, I think lock and tag, you have to have authorized employees. That means they have had sufficient training. And there's a variety of crafts, and I'm sure you all have in your staff that have to have the training necessary and the competency in order to do their job. Energy isolation, hot work, confined space permits. In the oil and gas, the hot work and energy isolation, as in any maintenance activity, energy isolation is an important part. When in fact you can't control things, employees wear PPE, respiratory, hearing protection, clothing, glasses, hard hats, boots, and those are intended to help minimize the hazard in the event something does go wrong. Training, and obviously I'm sure you have lots of training that are OSHA required or company specific that you have to go through. Okay, now let's talk about building the JSA. As I mentioned earlier, it is a process, and I think it is a good way to engage workers. The people that are actually doing the work should be involved in building the JSA. I recall not too long ago, we got a number of field guys in and we're building the JSA, and I was very impressed with what the individuals came up, the guys that were doing the work, things that I had not even thought about that were important to making sure we were aware of. What you then want to do is after you select the job, you want to break it into a number of tasks or steps, and we'll show you how a JSA looks like and how you may break those into steps or tasks. Identify the hazards, as we talked about earlier, and then practical controls to minimize those. Then you want to document that process and document it in some form or fashion. And then one of the things that we've talked with folks that are users, building folks in particular, they say, man, things change all the time. So recognizing the conditions change, and you document and discuss before the job, but if the job is large enough, you may want to recognize that conditions change over time and need to update it and then review it with your workers. Now, I think that that's a critical part of it is store and reuse knowledge. I don't know how you all are with Word and Excel documents and files and folders. I hope you all have a great system for doing that, but if it, I tend to fall short in that area, and I suspect there's others who do as well, keeping track of documents. Thank heavens for search features. But storing that knowledge is important so you can reuse it and don't have to reinvent the wheel. Now, how should you, or what task kind of, or what jobs trigger a JSA? And I looked at OSHA, and they have a number of different things that they outline as obviously the highest injuries and illness rates is one of them. And I've highlighted 3 here in red that I think apply to the maintenance activities, and that is potential to cause severe injuries or illnesses, potential for exposure to harmful substances. When you're out there redoing pumps, redoing lines, sometimes your exposure goes up to those harmful substances and chemicals and so on. And then ones that I think is sometimes overlooked is new or infrequently performed. I'm sure your routine maintenance, you may not need to do a JSA for those, but when you change out a pump, and it's not very often that you do it, you may want to think about changing out that pump and doing a JSA in advance of it so that you can control, put in the appropriate controls. OSHA has some different things complex enough to require written instructions, and then where employees are alone or in isolated places. Okay, let's open up a JSA here. We're going to show you what one looks like, and this is just an example of a JSA. In the first part of it is obviously the admin piece of it, which is the who, what, where, when, why, how. It's everything you need to do in order to document who's doing it, when it's doing, what it is regarding to, where it is. And in some instances, those of you who have robust programs may have a sign-off that is required, a supervisory sign-off or some sign-off by the safety organization. It just depends upon how you're structured. The second part of this JSA is really the heart of the JSA, and that is the task and then the potential hazards aligned with that task, and then recommended safe job procedures. Now, when we go into our JSA Builder, we will show you how you select controls. And for example, in admin controls, you may have a heat illness prevention program, but it may say, you know, make sure there's plenty of shade available. Well, in the case of these recommended safe job procedures, we want to drill down and allow the folks to actually think about what are the things they want to do. And at the last sentence, it says erect awning over work area to provide shade. That is something that's very specific to this particular task. We're going to be doing a motor repair, or actually a motor replacement of a conveyor belt motor. You can see the photo of what that conveyor is, and that motor at the end of it is the one we will be replacing. Again, remember that this is documenting a process that you've already gone through to come up with your hazards and controls. Now, if we scroll down, and these tasks, we've kind of set them up, and if you think of the logic here, it's really mobilize, de-energize, disconnect, remove and replace, reconnect, re-energize, and then demobilize. It's kind of the sequence of logic here. But with each step, we have the hazards associated and then these recommended safe job procedures. Now, at the bottom of the JSA, you will see some additional detail. And what that is as you go through our program, you will see that you pick out the physical hazards. You could do the probability and severity of the hazard, which means it's kind of the what if. See, what if something bad happens here, where there's a high probability of something happening here, and what's the severity of this happening? Well, it could be pretty high. In this case, some of them are high, some of them are not so high. And then the consequences. And this is intended to help you in discussion of what the physical hazards are, what the consequences of the hazards are, and then the controls that you have selected. You go through the hazards, and at the bottom we have the hazard control. Okay, so that's what the JSA looks like, what a typical JSA looks like. Now, let me go over to JSA Builder, and we want to show you. As I mentioned earlier, I think storing your information is critical in the JSA world, because you don't want to reinvent the wheel. You want to store that knowledge so you can use it over and over again. In this case, we're going to find our motor replacement, and we're going to copy that because we've already looked at it, and we say, hey, that one's going to work for this motor replacement that we're doing in our other facility. Take a second here, and in addition to what we have here on this table is we also have it so individuals can set up a folder structure. Having a little apology. Driving error here. Good luck, okay, we're back to the table. Do you have the motor one?
Oh, apologies.
Well, we're sorry we're having a little trouble driving the buggy here, but we'll hopefully get that back online so you can see how easy it is to update one. Okay, motor replacement, and we want to copy.
Just go ahead and go into that.
Okay, go in and go into it. As you can see, we're going to modify this particular worksheet. Okay, in the first two parts of the way we have it set up is we have that who, what, where, when, and while. The first two pages are the worksheet, general information. Okay. Okay, and as you see down below, we have physical, chemical, biological, and radiological hazards. That way the program will bring up the those particular hazards. So move on. Again, we're going to do this at the San Diego plant, so we'll just put in the San Diego, and that'll show up. And then we'll put in the date, who's doing it, and the date. Today is the 16th. So, okay, move on to the next one. If you look at our hazards, what we have is pre-programmed in, I think it's like 80 physical hazards. And what you do is you do a checkbox of the hazard. And as you see here, in this particular, we've had our discussion with our maintenance guys, and they say, okay, well, this thing, we're going to have to be aware of this hazard. We're going to have to be aware that we're going to have heavy manual lifting. We're going to have hot weather. We got ladders because it's an elevated surface. We have to have a lifting equipment to move the pump into place. So they'll identify the physical hazards. We have to cross a parking lot with the Rona, you still there?
Yes, I am.
We're getting some feedback on the line. Okay, so we'll continue going. And what we've done is we've programmed in these 80 hazards. They're intended to be prompts to help the maintenance guys understand what those physical hazards are, select them. Then you can add at the bottom, if there's anything that's not in the physical hazard list, you can add in those hazards. We have the consequences built in, so you can suggest consequences. So if you have lifting equipment, there may be hazards associated with strains and sprains and awkward positions and so on. So we have that set up for the physical hazards. Now let's move on to the next one, which are the chemical hazards. We have 50 chemicals in the database. We're always looking to add to that. And what you do is you actually put in this case, we have motor oil. The pump change out will possibly expose people to motor oil from lube oil. So we need to recognize that and account for it as a hazard on the project. Then we'll go to the biological hazard. Since it's an outdoor, it's a favorite place for black widows. We put that in insect and spider bites and things that guys may need to be aware of when they're out in that area. And then we put in the consequences of those hazards. Now let's move on to the next one. And it's similar with the radiological hazards. In this case, we have a laser in the proximity that we need people to be aware of. Now, let's move on to the step builder, which is really the heart, or I'm sorry, the controls. The controls are you say, okay, we've got all these hazards. Now, what controls are we going to put in place or have in place for the admin controls? We have safety manual. We have equipment maintenance manuals. We have a lot of things in there that you can select. We have engineering controls, maybe put in an energy isolating device, fall protection. So there's a variety of different controls that you can select from what's pre-programmed, or you can actually enter your own control. Let's move on to the step builder. Okay, the step builder, as you can see, we have the steps listed out that you saw in that JSA. And we're going to create a new step because as we looked through that, we realized, we didn't have moving the motor from the maintenance building over to the site, and we'll need to do a hoist for that. So when we bring this up, we're going to type in there, move the replacement motor into place. So you could see the hazards we selected before. We're going to have some lifting equipment. We're going to cross the parking lot. We're going to have hand tools, etc. So, and then then we're going to put in some safe job procedures. And we've typed in some things here that we'll just copy in. And some things like you clear the maintenance shop so you can get the motor out, rig and lift the motor, you take it across the parking lot, and you obviously have uneven surfaces that you have to be aware of. You have vehicles, so you may want to have a traffic flagman accompanied so they can divert traffic or stop traffic as you move the equipment. And then, just avoiding getting yourself into awkward positions as you lift the motor and get the motor staged properly. Okay? Now we'll add that step. And it adds it down at the bottom. And then we program it so you can move it up to the top, because it's actually the second step in this process. Our first step is to mobilize and then move the replacement equipment. Now we will go ahead and we've completed it. We've updated our JSA, so we'll finish it. And as you see, we're going to go ahead and open it. And you can see from this console, we give you the idea of looking at your hazard distribution, some general information about the worksheet and some identifiers on it. And then what we do is give you the eMaint link, so eMaint link can be pasted in and the integration can take place. So if you could open up just real quick, and we will, as you can see that you've seen it before, move down to that second step, and we put that step in, move replacement motor into place. So that's how we're set up. Now I'm going to turn it over to Sam, and he's going to talk about the eMaint integration.
Okay. Just so everybody can hear me. So as John has spoken about earlier, JSA Builder and eMaint have joined into a partnership of sorts that allows eMaint and JSA Builder to work together. And the slide you're looking at now talks about the two different ways we can do that. Right now we have a partial integration solution where this applies to those of you who are eMaint users, of course. So you'll understand a little bit better. But as far as the partial integration goes, JSA Builder provides an eMaint link, and we just saw that on the previous page. That link is you can select it. You create the JSA in JSA Builder. You would select that link, and then eMaint provides a space within eMaint that you can just paste that link. And then when you go to, I believe when you go to download your maintenance, your work request, that link provides a window right into JSA Builder, and then it is automatically, the JSA you've selected is automatically pulled into eMaint, and then you can print it out along with whatever else you need. That's the partial integration solution. That's what we have functional now with our clients for eMaint, and that's what's functional. We also have a second option, which is a full integration, which would allow you not only, you would skip the step of actually having to paste the copy and paste the link from JSA Builder to eMaint. You could skip that completely. You would just hit a button within eMaint, which would pull up your entire list of JSAs that are in JSA Builder. And you would just select from that, and it automatically be integrated that way. So those are the two different ways that we have now currently that we can integrate JSA Builder and eMaint. And so that's how it would work.
Okay. So the last slide. Okay. We've got some time for questions here, so I'll turn it over to you, Rona, and you can see if there are any questions, and hopefully we can answer those questions here, or if not, we can get back with the individual who posed the question. So, Rona?
Sure. Well, one of the questions that we had, John, was for compliance with the ADA, They sometimes recommend that you have a doctor or a physical therapist to review your JSAs. And can you speak to that, that under what conditions is it best to have someone outside of the maintenance department and some type of medical professional
Yeah, we actually have one of our clients who did that. He's been doing it for a couple of years, manufacturing, and what he does is work with with his physician, and he develops a JSA for each job description, if you will, line workers, and he shares that then with the doctor, and the doctor reviews it and then actually does some recommendations on things that they may want to do in order to adapt to the workplace, to the employee, or put in additional adaptations for controls. So it has been used for that. So I think that point is a very good and valid point.
Okay. And we also had questions, John, regarding some of our listeners out there have had some experience with JSAs, and they understand the value of them, but they're currently working at organizations that don't really understand JSAs and their value. And I'm sure you've probably encountered that before. And what recommendations can you have to kind of help some of the folks in the maintenance department to inspire others in their organizations, and particularly management, that this is an important topic to consider?
That's the age-old question in the safety, is how do you get buy-in? How do you get management commitment, management support? I think if you can find advocates in the safety department or advocates in your management structure, those are certainly a way to do it. One way that I know that I have personally been successful is understanding cost that injuries result in, and what you sometimes do is you get your work compensation costs, you get other costs that you can, and show management the cost of injuries. Obviously, they understand the toll that's taken on the employee's family, but sometimes if you put it in a dollars and cents, business people can understand that if you can reduce injuries, you help reduce costs for workers' compensation, wages, lost productivity, all of the things that I mentioned. That certainly has been one way that has been effective, but it's an age-old challenge. How do you get the workforce engaged, others engaged in safety? And that certainly is a never-ending challenge. So let me put it to you that way.
Absolutely. Someone is asking, someone from the trucking industry, John, is saying that everything in their day-to-day job could be considered a form of hazard. So what are your recommendations as far as prioritizing? Do you just take the most dangerous hazards and start there? Or maybe you could make some recommendations in, what is a particularly hazardous industry or environment.
Yeah, well, certainly starting with your areas where you have injuries, and you look at those injury statistics and you analyze those first. That is a starting point that I think is a very effective way, because then you can be speaking from a position of knowledge. One of the things that safety always requires is facts, and facts can be gained from a variety of different ways. And you can also pilot. I mean, I've been involved with pilot programs where companies say, well, we've got a problem in this area. We need to pilot it and try some of these things in order to make it a safer workplace. They set out what the plan is and see if over time or how it does impact the workplace. it's an ongoing challenge how to get employees, management engaged in workplace safety. That's why I like the JSA Builder or JSA, the Job Safety Analysis, because it is a process where you can get their voice. And you get the voice of the individual, and they suddenly get a buy-in to safety.
Gotcha. A couple of specific questions that came through, John, is JSA Builder, is there a language translation possibilities, at least in the printable reports for those of our listeners that have multilingual workplace?
Yes, we currently have it translatable into Spanish, correct? Mm-hmm. So we have a feature that allows the written document to be translated into Spanish and for those Spanish-speaking workers. And we've had several that, actually a number of companies that use the feature, and I think it makes a lot of sense.
Very good. And can JSA Builder work with HASP online to build a complete health and safety plan?
Yes. Yes, HASP Online is another service that we provide. I don't know the individual we're referring to, but yes, we can integrate the two. Right now they're kind of separate, but we have a way to do the integration, and it can be accomplished.
Very good. Well, I think, John, that was it for our questions today, and I'd really like to thank you and your team for putting this together. It's been very informative, and I would like to let our listeners know that the JSA Builder team is willing to share a copy of the slides as well as provide further demonstrations. So please feel free to, there'll be a survey when we end the webinar, and there'll be a checkbox where you can mention that you're interested in getting a copy of the presentation. So I would like to thank our folks from JSA Builder for putting this together and sharing all of their knowledge with all of us today. I hope that's been informative. And also I'd like to ask that for future sessions, if there's other topics that either JSA Builder pertaining to safety or other topics that are important to our listeners, there'll be a spot where you can indicate those as well, because we do want to bring you programs that you find to be valuable. So again, thanks to everybody for joining us, and thanks to John and Sam and Ashley for hosting this today. And this is Rona from eMaint Enterprises, and sorry if we didn't get to all of your questions today. Please feel free to type them in, and we'll follow up with you after the session. All right, and we hope that we'll see you all the next time. Thanks again.
Thank you, Rona.
Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye now.
Bye now.